Hi folks, AJ here, CEO of Snapser. Snapser is a modern gaming slash app backend platform which allows you to pick the features that you want, assemble them together like Lego building blocks, and have a fully managed Kubernetes backend at your disposal. As part of this series, what we're going to do is pick up one snap, or think of it as a feature within Snapser, and really go through the basics of what the snap does. And so today, the first snap that we're starting with is remote configuration, which, in my opinion, is one of the most important features from a backend standpoint. So what I've done as a setup is I've created a project space in Snapser, and I've built a backend here, as you can see, called personalization demo, which has our authentication and remote configuration snaps. There'll be a separate video explaining, the authentication snap, which also is a very foundational piece of software for any game or application. But let's focus on remote configuration. So what remote configuration does is it allows you to really fine tune or change the behavior of your application or your game client. And the best way to think about remote configuration is two things: is your application or your game config, and the second is your user configuration. Let's look at app configuration first. Oftentimes you want your client to even before a user logs in, get some data from the server. Things like, is my maintenance window on? Oftentimes you've probably looked at applications or games that throw a pop-up saying, hey, there's a maintenance going on, please come back in 15 minutes. Those are the kind of things that you can send to the game client through the app config. And then there's user config. Think of it as the configuration that you want to send to the client once you know who the user is accessing, or what user is using your application or game client. User configuration further allows you to personalize things individually for different cohorts of users, and we'll be doing a separate video explaining that. Let's go through the app config and see how it looks within Snapser. So the app config has a config tool where you can create your app config that is applicable to the entire game or application. And for this video, let's assume that we have a concept called as a maintenance window. And the minute the client sees a maintenance window flag, it throws a pop-up and tells the client to come back in some time. So here, let's call it V1. You can version your application configs, and let's add maintenance to false. This tells your game client that look for the maintenance JSON object. Its value is going to be either true and false, and depending on that, you now throw a pop-up or allow the user to log in and continue into the application. I hit save, and there you go, our app configuration has been created. Let's now look at how the user config is, which is very similar, which consists of nothing but a JSON file that is sent to the client. However, while accessing a user config, the game client has to pass the authenticated user's identifier and token. So let's create a base user config, and this time what we're going to do is imagine that there's a particular feature, let's call it feature A, and you want to start off with the feature being false, so no user sees it, and at some point in time, once everything looks good, you want to enable it. So what you can do is you can go to your user config and add feature A, and let's start it off as false and hit save. There it is. So you're starting this feature with it being turned off. Unlike an app config, user config has a concept called as overrides, because all the users can have the same config sent to it, but now different users can get different overrides so that they can get a completely different experience. Like I said, the personalization part will be covered in another segment, but let's quickly add an override. But this time, just make it blank for all users. Let's say a product manager comes in and they finally want to enable this feature. Let's call it an override called as enable feature A. It's for all users, and this is where you can pick the path, which is feature A path, and you want to turn it to true. Additionally, you can activate it and ramp it to a certain segment of users or certain percent of your entire user base. So the feature is not directly turned on for everyone at the same time. Or you can just turn it on for everyone as well. The sort order is a nuance where, let's say you have conflicting overrides, it allows you to further sort them on what order you want Snapser to apply these overrides. So let's hit save, and there it is. Now your user configuration has this feature flag enabled to true. How do the APIs look like? Well, they're pretty straightforward. You go to the app config. Like I said, app config is pre-auth, and so does not take any user information. All you have to do is pass in your v1, you hit get, and there it is. You now see your maintenance equal to false, which is why the client is not going to really show that pop-up. On the user configuration side, however, as you can see, the backend takes in a user ID and a token. Now that's, to show this demo, that's the reason why I added authentication, because what I want to do is, in front of you, go and create a new user. I have enabled anonymous login for this demo, which just makes it very easy for us to test. So I'm going to create a user called as test. There it is. Your user ID and session token for the user is right here. But Snapser also, stores it in your helper, which allows you to smartly copy it for subsequent API use. So let's now go back to remote configuration, folks. And this time, let's hit get user config. Let's copy the user ID. Snapser supports smart copy, which just allows you to copy both ID and token in one go. So I can do command 1v, command 2v. So there it is, the user's ID and token has been copied. And if I hit get here, I'm going to now see the feature enabled to true, because remember, the override was ramped to all the users. If I hit get, there it is, the feature has been ramped to true. Now let's assume, days pass and the product team wants to shut down the feature. They can go back to the tools, back to the remote configuration overrides, and they can either delete the override or ramp it down. I'm just going to delete it. We don't want this anymore, and the feature needs to be turned off. Now, if you go back to the API and you go back to your user config API and hit get, you're now going to get feature A equal to false. So this is how, the remote configuration snap really allows you to give dynamically pass in data to your game client, allowing you to really feature gate features and do other things that you want to be controlled by the server. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.